From the outside looking in, it's difficult to imagine how the clans saw themselves and their institutions as demonstrating an ideal civilization. From their highly ritualized and impractical warfare, producing just enough in their command economies, as well as the thriving crab-pot interclan opportunism, it strains the ability to suspend disbelief that they managed to survive as long as they did. Well, as long as some of them did. The on-again, off-again rivalry between Clan Steel Viper and Clan Jade Falcon demonstrates many of these warped principles to tragic effect. With the failure of the clan invasion to reclaim Terra resulting in the obliteration of Clan Smoke Jaguar and Huntress, the delicate dance of power players on the clan homeworlds was thrown into chaos. With scarce resources suddenly available and Khans seeking to get even with their rivals, history judged the clans harshly in the resulting Wars of Reaving. Though our battle mech of the day was created long before this dark period of time for the clans, and specifically the Steel Vipers, the Battle Cobra was well represented as a key omnimech in the tumens of most of the homeworld clans. If the Steel Vipers' resentment of their failed fellow clans was their motivation, the Battle Cobra was their cudgel. Well, one of them anyway. Stick around and let's get into it, Mechwarrior. When he reached the Viper rally point and learned of the disaster at Damon Beach and the Steel Viper's Khan's acceptance of Hagira, pledging to leave the Inner Sphere and return to the distant clan homeworlds, Julian realized his people had forever given up their hopes of conquering Terra and becoming the ruling IlClan. Runner, Shrapnel number 22, by Eric Salzman. Channeling their inner Robespierre, Clan Steel Viper was quick to denounce the other clans, which they deemed tainted by their contact with the Inner Sphere. Hardly any clanner was safe from accusations which varied from adopting dishonorable Inner Sphere tactics in the case of the Jade Falcons, to soiling clan reputations by welcoming a mercenary unit into the fold of the Goliath Scorpions. Not even the wily Diamond Sharks were immune from criticism, though of all the clans, their dealings with the houses of the Inner Sphere rivaled the treachery of the Nova Cats in its prolific extent. The reaction from the accused clans varied, but the common thread was that the contact with the Inner Sphere wasn't a taint so much as accepting reality. If the clans were going to survive, they had to adapt to the fact that the Inner Sphere states were never going to adopt clan tactics and Zellbriggen. Continuing to smash your head against that concrete wall was the path to destruction. Even the arrogant Jade Falcons could see that by the 3060s. Of course, from the perspective of some of the home clans, all of this was very destabilizing and a threat to what had previously been a very careful political and military balance. Clearly both sides had a powerful argument considering how the Wars of Reaving would completely change the landscape and result in millions of needless deaths. Though the Steel Vipers were not alone in their brutal condemnation of the quote-unquote tainted clans, they were eager to play this dangerous game. Star Commander Julian's Battle Cobra contributed as best it could, its pulse lasers sending emerald bursts of coherent light strobing toward Falcon elementals trying to ford the river, burning each armored infantryman down in turn, whether they waded through the shallows or tried to jump across. None reached the Viper's shore. Yet most of his arsenal remained in standby mode, optimized for close-range infighting. For the 100th time, Julian considered charging the river himself, pressing the Battle Cobra across the ford and seeing how many Falcons he could take down before his mech was torn to pieces. Runner, Shrapnel number 22, by Eric Salzman. When the Clan Steel Viper scientist cast members began to work on their new 40-ton Omnimech in the early 2870s, they were building on success with the 65-ton crossbow, which was in full production by the beginning of that decade. Though there was a 25-ton difference between the two Omnimechs, they were considered by many to be sistered, as they shared a considerable number of components, including a streamlined arm-mounting pod system which made maintenance significantly easier for techs. Working from an aggressive design philosophy, the Battle Cobra that stomped off the assembly lines on New Kent in 2873 benefited from mass-saving Cobra Endo-Steel and 6.5 tons of V3 ferrofibrous armor wrapped around a New Kent Type 240 standard fusion engine. It's worth noting that the use of a standard engine improved the mech's survivability. That's going to be the name of the game here. The cost was paid through a less powerful engine that limited the Battle Cobra to 97 kilometers per hour. However, if you paint it red and add a racing stripe, you might get it up to 98.6. After cramming in a cockpit, gyro, and the obligatory 10 double heat sinks, that left a grand total of 14 tons of pod space across 31 critical locations. For comparison, the Viper, or Dragonfly if you prefer, also stood at 40 tons but had just 8.5 tons of pod space due to hard-installed jump jets and a half-ton of additional armor. The Viper's 320 XL engine made it the faster option, but at the cost of those side torso critical hit locations. The Battle Cobra offered flexibility and durability at that 40-ton mass point. Sure, it lacked hand actuators and looked like it was rocking an epic set of 80s shoulder pads, but it had moxie, and that's what the Steel Vipers wanted. The Prime configuration was a no-fuss setup, which set the tone for many of the other official configurations moving forward. Two large pulse lasers, split between the arms, provided their powerful and accurate damage out to what would normally be considered long range for most weapon systems. For close-range conflict resolution, a pair of small pulse lasers were paired with the large pulse lasers in the arms. They would end up being useful against things like battle armor, infantry, and clearing invasive blackberry bushes. The Prime configuration was a no-fuss setup, which set the tone for many of the other official configurations moving forward. Two large pulse lasers split between the arms provided their powerful and accurate damage out to what would normally be considered long range for most weapons systems. Not even time was a friend, as the 10 double heat sinks were enough to keep the Battle Cobra firing on the run for 4 turns before the modifiers really started to stack up. Of course, if a warrior preferred a more distributed light show experience, the A configuration offered that in spades, exchanging the 2 large pulse lasers for 4 medium pulse lasers, increasing the total possible damage at the cost of range. Additionally, 6 small pulse lasers could be brought to bear at close range, which could render most light mechs into scrap before you could say, "Hey, look at the pretty colors." The heat profile for the A configuration offered no mercy, as its 4 medium pulse lasers could be fired on the run without crossing over into the red. Only when more than one of the small pulse lasers was added to the mix could the Battle Cobra start to get hot. However, without any ammunition, if the perfect moment arose, the Mechwarrior could go all in with a 46 damage Alpha Strike on the run and only end up 10 into the red. Not too shabby at all. The last of the original 2873 configurations was the B, and it sought to create a powerful ranged menace with the installation of 2 ERPPCs split between the arms, backed up by a pair of small pulse lasers. While obviously anytime you're pairing up clan ERPPCs, the potential for single-shotting targets was tempting. However, this was the first Battle Cobra that suffered from significant heat issues, as the 10 double heat sinks struggled to maintain consistent fire from both of the particle projection cannons. The Mechwarrior was forced by the limiting properties of math and physics to either stagger the ERPPC shots or spend time sloughing off the extra heat after firing both at once, hoping either to take out the target or to find cover to cool off. First distributed exclusively within Clan Steel Viper, the Battle Cobra became their signature medium Omnimech in scouting and harassment stars. As time passed, other clans adopted it too, including Clan Blood Spirit and even the Jade Falcons, the perennial Steel Viper rival. Apparently, the Blood Spirit warriors were fond of the B configuration, presumably because when you pass out in your overheated cockpit, you can get some much-needed sleep. When Clan Steel Viper joined the invasion of the Inner Sphere, they brought their Battle Cobras with them, much to the annoyance of anyone who had to encounter it. It earned some distinction during the trial of Tukayyid in 3052 when the Steel Vipers in the 205th Viper Striker cluster dropped with a large number of Battle Cobras into the fray of Devil's Bath. Never before or since have I dealt with such skin-crawling perfidy. Comstar treated honorably with the clans up to that point, so why is it their warriors showed such a lack of it? Be sure Yekel chose his battlefield wisely, that I will never dispute, but his complete disregard for honest combat sickens me to this day. The Devil's Bath is where we first encountered the taint of the Inner Sphere, and what happened there is why we must eradicate it. Personal Journal of Con Brett Andrews, 5th of May, 3071. The very active geologic features of the Devil's Bath on Tukayyid created unpredictability across the fight, which confounded the Steel Vipers and reinforced their frustration with foes from the Inner Sphere. The Comguard used the terrain to pop in and out of sight, taking shots from cover and otherwise frustrating the clanners who craved a stand-up slugfest. Unfortunately for the Steel Vipers, the Devil's Bath became a kill zone where an entire trinary of the first Viper guards were wiped out in just a few minutes. Ultimately, Alpha Galaxy was forced to begin a fighting withdrawal. Seeing that the snakes were leaving the trap, Precentor Bishor Yekel of the Comguard 6th Division yelled over the open comlink. His words weren't so much a challenge as much as a direct insult to the Steel Vipers. Naturally, the clans never really could miss an opportunity to go into an ambush, so Con Brain ordered Alpha and Gamma Galaxies to turn again and charge back into the Devil's Bath. Over the next few days, the Steel Vipers fought through every trap and ambush set up in their path. In a shocking turn of events, the maze of rocky geologic features and bubbling cauldrons of boiling water became a quagmire from which the Steel Vipers could not escape. Unable to pivot, and with their logistics lines obliterated by flanking maneuver from the Comguard's 1st Division, the Steel Vipers only barely avoided a rout. To their credit, a Star Colonel by the name Robert Grimani ended up running into the Comstar Precentor with the big mouth, and ended up kicking him and his Atlas into a searing mud pit. Ultimately, the Steel Vipers were forced onto the retreat, leaving behind many warriors and machines on the scorched surface of the battlefield. The Steel Vipers were beaten but not broken, and any Viper warrior would be quick to point out that the clan's casualties were light in comparison to the other clans in the trial, and the kill-to-death ratio against the Comguard was nearly 2-1. What was overlooked at the time was the fact that dozens of battle Cobras had been left behind in various states of destruction. While salvage isn't normally notable, someone within Comstar must have been paying close attention and took an opportunity when they saw it. Many of the intel folk from across the Inner Sphere made the call that Comstar would be quick to take advantage of all the clan technology left behind by their defeated foes. Briefings and restoration estimates painted pictures of legions of Comguard piloting clan battlemechs and refits of Inner Sphere designs sporting lighter and more powerful clan weaponry. Unfortunately, these predictions proved to be somewhat misguided as the internal political structures within Comstar undermined every effort. The nascent word of Blake was working from within to gradually take control of key aspects of Comstar, and that included top engineers and scientists who would have otherwise been given the keys to the candy shop with funding and access to clan technology to reverse engineer. It is at this point that the history of the Battle Cobra begins to split into two evolutionary paths. While the clans would continue to use the Omnimech in its existing form with plenty of new official configurations, the Comstar design team tasked with creating an Inner Sphere Omnimech version pushed ahead as best they could in a tumultuous political environment. Though work began in the early 3050s, the Battle Cobra BLT C-20 project would not see results until 3063, largely due to the loss of Terra and all of the research and development to the Word of Blake in 3058. We'll return to the Inner Sphere Battle Cobra in a bit, but before that there are a couple of new clan configurations to hit in the 3050s, so let's get into them. In 3057, the Battle Cobra F configuration was codified with a shockingly plain loadout for this point in the timeline. The F's 3 ER medium lasers set into the left arm aren't too shabby on their own, but they were backed up by an Ultra AC-5 autocannon set into the right arm, which was fed by a single ton of ammunition in the same limb. The config's last feature was the addition of 6 jump jets split between the side torsos, which created a jumping Cobra. Exactly what we needed, right? The fancy new tech would have to wait for the next 2 official configurations, because the F configuration screamed practical functionality. It couldn't overheat unless you were jumping and alpha striking, which always sounds more fun than it is in practice. While running and gunning, the F is cool as a cucumber. Hopping a few years forward to 3061, we see our obligatory heavy laser submission with the H configuration. Starting at long range, two ER-large lasers did most of the work with a reliable, if warm, 10 damage out to 25 hexes. Once the H config is within rock-throwing range, the two medium-heavy lasers could be brought to bear on a target. Their 10 damage apiece with the +1 to hit modifier is only somewhat terrifying at 0 to 6 hexes, where your shots will be more reliably hitting the intended target. Still, it's a potential 40 damage in 4 chunks, and that's not something that can be ignored for long. The H config's additional double heatsinks help make an alpha strike possible, but while on the run, it would still leave the Mech 12 heat into the red. Not great, but not terrible. In 3062, as a testament to the fact that order apparently doesn't matter, the C configuration Battle Cobra stomped onto the scene, irresponsibly wielding an advanced tactical missile 9 launcher. Set into the left arm along with 2 tons of ammunition, the C config could take advantage of the varying ATM ammunition types, but not to the extent that third ton of ammo would have provided. Once within mid and short range, 3 right arm mounted medium pulse lasers offered their reliable and accurate damage, and finally a small pulse laser, also in the right arm, brought a little bit more heat to the party. Running relatively cool, the C configuration could be deceptively powerful in a short-range fight if the ATM-9 is packed with that high explosive ammunition. In a short-range Alpha Strike event, that would be a possible 51 damage, which is not so bad for a 40-ton clan mech. While it would be really nice to have that third ton of ATM ammunition, the C config is still a strong performer. The fast-moving Battle Cobra, most likely a relic of some battle between the Falcons and the Steel Vipers, raced around the rock formation at almost point-blank range in front of Adam Steiner's Thunderhawk. The pair of Galleon light tanks behind him fired at the same time he let go with his own lasers. The heat in the cockpit rose slightly as he heard the whine of the capacitors release their deadly lances of crimson death. 2 shots went wide, the other hit it on the right side. The Galleons missed with half of their shots, while the rest poured into the arm and torso of the Jade Falcon mech. The Battle Cobra reeled as a barrage sheared off its right arm at the shoulder actuator, and a thick gray smoke rose from the severed limb. The Battle Cobra contorted slightly under the assault, stopped, then fired its remaining medium and small lasers. Operation Audacity by Blaine Lee Pardoe. Finally, eventually, inevitably, the Inner Sphere Battle Cobra program produced a functioning design. If that doesn't sound like a ringing endorsement already, perhaps beauty is in the eye of the beholder. The BTL C-20 that stomped off the Comguard Omega Epsilon production lines on Tukayyid looked very much like the clan mech that inspired it, but make no mistakes, this is an entirely new snake. It's also worth noting that everything on the C-20 was Inner Sphere grade technology. No clan stuff made it through the design process. Thanks word of Blake, you jerks. Still weighing in at 40 tons, the chassis was produced on Alshane with designated Type 69 40S endosteel wrapped around a standard Nissan 200 Fusion engine. This limited the top speed of the C-20 to 86 km per hour, but maintained a more compact and durable design that had defined the original Battle Cobra. There weren't any jump jets, but it was protected by 7 tons of ferrofibrous armor, which nearly maxes out the protection possible for a 40-ton battle mech, and matches the protection from the original clan design. When working out the locations for the 10 double heat sinks, designers discovered a limiting issue that would plague the mech moving forward. The reduced engine power meant that only 8 of the double heat sinks could be contained within the engine. The remaining 2 heat sinks had to be split between the side torsos, which cut the open pod space by 6. With the addition of all the normal bits, the combination of heat sinks, ferrofibrous armor, and endosteel frame left just 12 critical locations to devote to pod space. Opportunity cost spares no one, my friends, not even Comstar. The standard configuration for the Comstar Battle Cobra was Spartan, with just 2 large pulse lasers put between the arms. Unfortunately, they were the Inner Sphere spec weapons, so the range and damage paled in comparison to the mech's inspiration. Since it was the 3060s, it's not a surprise that an improved C3 computer was added to the center torso, which could play nice with the other Comguard mechs. To help deal with the heat from the pulse lasers, an 11th double heatsink was added to the right torso, which allowed the BLT C-20 to run around and fire both weapons without any heat buildup. While obviously not as powerful as the clan version of the mech, it could have been much worse. The limited pod space lends itself to a couple of more powerful but heavier weapons like the LPLs in this case. Let's see if any other standard configurations can bolster our opinions on it. The A configuration arrived along with the Prime in 3063, and it looks a bit like a masterfully played game where every nook and cranny is packed. Once again, all the equipment was Inner Sphere spec. The honor of being primary weapons was shared between a trio of medium pulse lasers in the left arm and 3 standard medium lasers installed into the right arm. The last remaining offensive weapon was a small pulse laser set into the left arm. Besides an 11th heatsink, the rest of the mass and space of the mech was dedicated to a collection of electronic warfare devices. This included the center torso improved C3, a Beagle active probe in the left arm, a Guardian ECM in the right arm, and finally a set of target acquisition gear in the right arm for artillery spotting. The BLT C-20A definitely qualifies as our Operation Sneaky Sneak configuration of the day. It's an interesting build if you're the sort of mech warrior who enjoys getting into the weeds with advanced rules for all the EW gear. The third of the original configurations for Comstar's Battle Cobra was the BTL C-20B, and it featured 4 medium-range missile 10 racks split between the arms. Each launcher could feed from 3 tons of ammunition placed into the right torso. Now before you get excited, don't forget that the Inner Sphere Omnimechs don't come with case by default, so that ammo is unprotected. Finally, once again, the improved C3 computer sat in the center torso. While the MRMs can be ferocious when close to a target, the possible 40 missile damage is muted by the +1 to hit penalty for the launchers. We'll see how things change should the proposed rule changes from CGL for the MRMs go through. For now, they are what they are. The B configuration would likely serve as a fire support machine in aid of other more powerful battle mechs that could punch through armor and let the B crit seek with the MRMs. At least that's how I would run it. The last of the original configurations was a truly odd duck, as the C config lacked any offensive weaponry. The job of the mech warrior who ran this build was to race up to a target, or multiple targets if it lived long enough, and launch improved narc beacons from a pair of launchers it carried split between the arms. There's not much to say about this one, as it's an incredibly niche design and otherwise worthless as anything but a C3 spotter. When looking at the Comstar Battle Cobra, it's difficult not to be underwhelmed by the effort. As with other 40-ton battle mechs, every ton of mass counts with very little margin for error. The Battle Cobra has a good amount of mass to play with, but the limitations on critical locations as well as a pretty lackluster set of official configs left many wanting more. Still, production began and Comstar was committed to the bit. Unfortunately, during the Word of Blake kerfuffle, the Tukayyid production lines were obliterated, leaving Comstar without new Battle Cobras and a shortage of replacement parts. Only through a hastily negotiated deal with Ark Royal Mechworks were the logistics lines restored after a few years. During the fight against the Word of Blake on Chertan, the Comguard 4th Army deployed 2 Level 2s of their Battle Cobras as an unexpected spearhead. Acting as the heavy guns for battle armor and infantry, the Battle Cobras proved useful. Sometimes kitted out as heavy hitters with a pair of large pulse lasers and other times as artillery spotters, the Blakeists were unable to accurately predict what the Battle Cobras were bringing to the party. In 3069, the BLT-CD-20 configuration of the Inner Sphere Battle Cobra was spotted, sporting a quartet of light particle projection cannons split between the arms and aided in their aim by a right torso-mounted targeting computer. Combined with the possible benefit of a C3 network, the D configuration allowed the Battle Cobra to operate as a mid-range skirmisher with surprisingly accurate PPC fire. While 5 damage at up to 18 hexes might not seem like much, 4 of them every turn could add up to something in the right moment. Heat generation was only an issue for the D config with sustained fighting on the run, so as long as you're not swarmed by light mechs that can stay within your 3 hex minimum range on those light PPCs, you can just go ahead and be everyone's problem. In 3070, the next BLT C-20 configuration was the E, and it featured a pair of multi-missile 9 launchers split between the arms and able to feed from 3 tons of ammunition in the right torso. While not a super powerful build, the E config could act as a reasonable 40-ton fire support mech that has a good amount of ammo if all 3 tons worth were devoted to LRMs. Going the other direction, being hit with up to 18 SRMs all at once could be rather painful. Choose your ammo wisely. The other 3070 config for the BLT C-20 was the F, and now things are really going to start getting interesting. The F was graced by not 1 but 2 plasma rifles, in one of the few cases where a cannon design carries more than 1. With 3 tons of ammunition stored in the right torso, each rifle could fire 15 times before the mech needed to scuttle back for resupply. It's simple, and I've opined on the beauty of the plasma rifle plenty of times on this channel before, so you should know by now that they're pretty great. If there's a downside for the F-config, it's the lack of backup weaponry and an ideal 4th ton of ammunition, which would have been amazing. If you haven't seen this one out in the wild, I'd recommend being the one to bring it to your next game to introduce your friends to the cult of plasma. Sticking to the timeline, we're going to briefly hop over to the clan side of things with the next official configuration designated the Battle Cobra X. How edgy. This 3073 config relied upon 5 medium improved heavy lasers, 2 in each arm, and the 5th set into the right torso. A targeting computer installed into the mech's head lowered the lasers to hit modifier to -1, making them quite a bit more accurate than their non-improved heavy laser predecessors. With the lasers hitting for 10 damage apiece out to 9 hexes, the Battle Cobra X is definitely a close-range brawler. The 8 additional double heat sinks pushed the total possible cooling per turn to 36, which is needed as firing all 5 of the lasers while on the run left the mech at 3 into the red. The possibility of doing 50 damage in 10 damage chunks is appealing, though the explosive nature of the heavy lasers makes the Battle Cobra a bit of a glass cannon. Well, more of a glass derringer maybe. In 3083, it's clear that whoever came up with the BTLC-20G Battle Cobra had the key to my roller skates, as it's clear that we are on the same wavelength for battle mech design. This Inner Sphere Battle Cobra sported a snub-nosed particle projection cannon in its right arm and a plasma rifle in the left, along with 2 tons of its inert ammunition. As if that wasn't enough, 2 machine guns were also installed, split between the arms, and fed from a half-ton of Case 2 protected ammunition in the right torso. The 11 double heat sinks were perfect for running and gunning without any heat buildup, so the 20G could be everyone's problem all the time. I love it. No notes. This is the Inner Sphere Battle Cobra in its ideal form. Unfortunately, when you glimpse perfection, everything else after that seems to pale in comparison. This is the case for the next 2 Inner Sphere Battle Cobras. They're not necessarily bad, but as I said, they're not the 20G. The BTLC-20H Battle Cobra carried a Thunderbolt 15 missile launcher in its right arm, which fed from 2 tons of case-protected ammunition in the right torso, and a 3rd ton stored next to the launcher in the arm, 12 shots total. For those who need a refresher, the Thunderbolts are large single missiles, so the Thunderbolt 15 does all 15 damage to a single location on the target. Basically the missile version of a Gauss rifle. The launcher was backed up by a trio of ER medium lasers which could do their reliable 5 damage out to 12 hexes. All 3 were placed into the open left arm pod space. Heat management was only a minor concern if alpha striking while on the run for more than 1 turn in a row. Otherwise, this was a pretty straightforward build. I would complain about there only being 12 shots of the Thunderbolt launcher, but let's be honest, this thing is probably not going to survive long enough to fire 12 times. Also in 3083, the BLT-C-20I configuration for the Inner Sphere Battle Cobra was spotted. This was a heavy scout and spotter build that employed an improved NARC missile beacon launcher in the right arm stocked with 3 tons of beacons. That's quite a few. That was a big mass commitment for the otherwise muted short-range build. 2 standard medium lasers were installed into the left arm along with 2 short-range missile foreracks that both fed from a single ton of Case 2 protected ammunition in the right torso. Finally, a laser anti-missile system was placed into the center torso to potentially increase the mech's lifespan if it tries to snag targets with those NARC beacons while running at just 86.4 kilometers per hour. With that, we're going to say goodbye to our Inner Sphere Battle Cobra. It's an entirely functional and respectable take, and better than some of the other attempts at creating an Inner Sphere Omnimech. I'm fond of it, and not just because of the plasma rifle variants. While not a superstar, the Battle Cobra is a perfectly viable pick for a 3060's Comguard unit. We're going to need to take a big leap down the timeline to 3140, where the next official configuration for the Battle Cobra raises its head. By this point, Clan Steel Viper no longer exists, having played the game of clan politics and coming up a little short. Their rampant condemnations of the other clans came back to bite them in July of 3075 when an overconfident Steel Viper Khan called out for a new invasion of the Inner Sphere at a Grand Council meeting. By this point, the homeworld clans that still existed were worn down from brutal war that included chemical and viral weapons deployed by the notorious Society rebels. Demands that the clans rapidly reindustrialize and pause the clan eugenics program for 5 years to make sure any taint could be eliminated from future Trueborn warriors were met with a lot of side eyes and muted commentary. Sometimes saying something that everyone knows is true can still be met with negative consequences. Sticking their neck out so far allowed the Star Outer Khan Stanislav and Buta to chop it off, with accusations that the Steel Viper's demands were proof that they themselves were tainted. Stunned by the shift in tone and content of the meeting, Andrews could only watch as a vote was immediately called on the motion to reave Clan Steel Viper. Are you getting Robespierre vibes? I know I am. Oh, how the mighty and self-declared virtuous fall. Only Clan Blood Spirit voted along with the Steel Vipers, who were suddenly on the chopping block. Khan Andrews immediately demanded a trial of refusal, and when Khan Unbuta accepted it, Andrews pulled a laser pistol from his jacket and shot Unbuta between the eyes. Naturally, this sort of unpredictable violence did not go over well. Well-organized and bargained violence was great, but shooting someone in the head with a laser pistol was just rude. Clan Cloud Cobra's Khan Halian Kardan calmly and coolly condemned the act, and then demanded the reaving of the Steel Vipers be changed to a trial of annihilation. The motion was quickly seconded and passed as the other clans took advantage of the smell of blood in the water. In the resulting chaos, Khan Andrews was knocked to the ground and murdered by the Star Adder Sakhan. While the Steel Vipers were one of the strongest homeworld clans at that point, they couldn't hope to survive against the combined might of the rest working together. In events that might be fun to recount someday in a Wars of Reaving video, Clan Steel Viper's resources were seized and warriors hunted down across clan space. The bulk of the Vipers' fleet centralized at New Kent, where they awaited their fate. In orbit and on the surface of New Kent, the clans ravaged and picked apart the Steel Vipers, leaving no survivors. On December 22nd, the legendary warship McKenna's Pride began an orbital bombardment of New Kent City, leveling it and killing everyone there, civilian and warrior alike. Perhaps the most pertinent non-life destruction worth noting was the New Kent Battle Cobra production lines, which ended the Mech story in the clan homeworlds. By early 3076, the last of the Viper enclaves and holdouts had been obliterated, and on February 10th, the IlClan declared the end of the trial of annihilation of Clan Steel Viper. As the smoke cleared, there were just 6 homeworld clans remaining. Hovering over the fallen Timberwolf, ignoring the mutterings of Reveal Pride, some of them curses directed at Diana, she faced the remaining 5 Viper mechs. Rotating her Nova's torso, she countered the Viper attacks as well as she could. She found it surprising that she could not tell which mech was piloted by Paragard Zalman. She kept her right arm PPC busy, since the arm had already taken some damage and she was not sure how long she could use it. One azure bolt of lightning demolished the cockpit of a Battle Cobra, and it came to a grinding stop. Diana moved her Nova around the fallen Timberwolf so that her mech acted as a barrier between the 4 remaining Viper mechs and Reveal's mech. What am I doing? Reveal Pride has vowed to challenge me on the blood name. I should just leave him to die. Falcon Rising, Twilight of the Clans, Volume 8, by Robert Thurston. While the destruction of Clan Steel Viper might have been an extinction-level event for the Clan Battle Cobra, events out in the Inner Sphere turned in the mech's favor. When Malvina Hazen's Jade Falcons descended upon Ark Royal on September 5th of 3146, it quickly became clear that this was neither a raid nor just a punitive expedition. The planet was a long-time home of the Kellhound's mercenary unit as well as the Wolves in Exile. Neither of them ranked very highly on Khan Hazen's list of close friends, and the Jade Falcons ruthlessly hunted down their units wherever found. Ultimately, both the Wolves in Exile and the Kellhounds were forced to retreat from the planet. One of the prizes of her new industrial world was the old Comstar Battle Cobra production line. With what must have been none too little satisfaction, the Jade Falcons retooled the production line once run by their old foes Comstar, producing the battle mech once cherished by the now eradicated Steel Vipers. The production lines were upgraded to all-clan tech, and it wasn't long before brand new Battle Cobras were joining the Clan Jade Falcon Tumen. The most recently spotted Battle Cobra configurations were all from this era, though the first 2 were spotted before the Falcons arrived on Ark Royal. The G configuration carried twin ER medium lasers split between the arms, joined by a pair of flamers and dual plasma cannons. Between the flamers and the plasma, the G config earns the trophy for Battle Cobra War Crime Edition. With 20 shots per plasma cannon, this config can obliterate infantry, light vehicles, and battle armor while also still putting in some nominal work with those 2 ER medium lasers at distance. The major drawback, as is so often the case with energy weapon builds, was the lack of heatsink coverage. A theoretical alpha strike while on the run left the G-Wagon Battle Cobra at 10+ into the red, which isn't devastating but will definitely slow things down in the near future. Against battlemech targets, the G might struggle to produce enough damage to be a big threat, especially if the opponent is running cool without a lot of energy weapons, nullifying the heat effects from the plasma cannons. The end result was a niche but powerful configuration if used in the right place at the right time. In 3142, the Battle Cobra received an official sniper build with the Config T. Twin ER large lasers were split between the arms and aided by a right torso mounted targeting computer. That's 10 damage apiece out to 25 hexes with a -1 accuracy boost on the 2 hit rolls. Not too shabby in the mid-range of 15 hexes either. If an enemy closes on the T, the 2 ER small lasers, also split between the arms, could come into play, also benefiting from that targeting computer. The 3 additional double heat sinks made it possible to run and gun with both ER large lasers without ending up in the red, which means there's no quarter for patient targets. The Battle Cobra T is everyone's problem all the time. By 3147, the Battle Cobra I configuration took a turn toward the saccharine sweet land of fire support with the installation of 2 LRM-15s aided by Artemis V fire control systems. Each launcher fed from its own 2 tons of ammunition stored in each arm. For those who need the reminder, the Artemis V fire control system adds a +1 modifier to attack rolls and +3 to rolls determining how many missiles strike the target. Largely due to the advantages that ClanTech LRM launchers have in mass over their inner sphere cousins, the Battle Cobra I is a solid LRM delivery mech. There's not much to complain about here, so I'm not going to. Our last and most recent official Battle Cobra configuration was the J, which hit the scene alongside the I config in 3147. This interesting interpretation of a build was centered on a right arm-mounted rotary AC-2 autocannon, which could send a lot of fire downfield out to 25 hexes. Backing up the autocannon, starting at 14 hexes, a pair of ER medium lasers in the left arm hit for 7 damage apiece with a -1 accuracy boost. That's it, that's the J. It's entirely functional, but you really need to like the RAC-2 to want to take this over other options, most of which are going to be doing a lot more damage. The Battle Cobra blocking their exit from the ravine turned its weapons on the Akuma. It missed with the PPC built into its right arm, but the left arm PPC on the flare-shouldered, no-necked battlemech struck the Akuma solidly. The errant beam exploded a leafy tree, casting flaming splinters all about, while the other one skewered the Akuma over its heart. The Combine mech wavered, telling Hohiro that the gyro had been hit, but the pilot kept his machine on its feet. Prince of Havoc by Michael A. Stackpole. The future of the Battle Cobra at the dawn of the IlClan era is uncertain. While the production lines on Ark Royal remained as Malvina raced her Jade Falcons toward Terra, the garrison left behind was ripe pickings for the Kellhounds, who returned with vengeance in their eyes in August of 3151. At this point, the Hounds were led by Duchess Calandra Kell, and she was highly motivated to liberate Ark Royal from Falcon control. The question over ownership of the planet was settled when Kell decided to crash a dropship into the assembled Jade Falcon garrison, wiping out not just thousands of Jade Falcons, but plenty of civilians as well. I know Malvina tends to suck all the oxygen out of any room, but we shouldn't forget that this universe has no shortage of people who are willing to do violent and terrible things to get what they want. The defiant roar of 1,000 martyrs echoed in Colonel Calandra Kell's memory, merging with the mechanical stream from her Feld Kommandeur Type 20 autocannon as she overspun its feeding mechanism and emptied the last of her primary ammo bin into the profile of a 40-ton Battle Cobra. A storm of 20mm depleted uranium ammunition smashed into and through the Cobra's shoulder, severing its arm before tracking across the Omnimech's main torso to crater a terrible wound. Ferroceramic armor spalled away in a flurry of sharp-edged chips and splinters. Woven myomer bundles parted like the musculature they resembled. Underlying endosteel skeleton deformed, buckled, fractured. The Battle Cobra, already straining its torso rotation to track Calandra's hovercraft, rocked back precariously as the loss of several tons of ruined structure overtaxed its gyroscope. Its right-leaning twist became a floundering spin as the Jade Falcon Mechwarrior fought against gravity, lost, collapsed heavily onto its right side, its shoulder plowing up a furrow of sandy earth and rust-covered clay. By the Sword, Tamar Rising, by Lauren L. Coleman. Now located within the Ark Royal Liberty Coalition, it's fair to assume that the Battle Cobra production line remains functional, or nearly so, following the liberation. During the fight at the Ark Royal Mechworks, Calandra's use of local rebel forces to flank Jade Falcon garrison forces in the factories prevented the destruction of critical technology. Unfortunately for the Kellhounds, the factories at Knucklehead, Crash Test, and Crackerjack were all spiked or rendered useless by the Jade Falcons as they fell back. If you want more details, check out the Ark Royal section in Tamar Rising. It's good stuff. The takeaway here is that now, presumably, the Kellhounds are in possession of Clan Battle Cobra production, with an unknown amount of pod weaponry both from existing stocks and salvaged from Clan Jade Falcon battlemechs on the planet. That's a nice prize for a mercenary unit. Now, before we mosey on down to the watering hole, I did want to take a crack at creating a Mechfrog configuration for our little snake friend. The Battle Cobra MF config mission statement was to create the most terrifying pain-in-the-butt 40-ton battlemech possible. It needed to be so dangerous that it had to be dealt with immediately. I hope it was successful, but perhaps you can let me know what you think. The MF's primary weapon is a right-arm-mounted extended-range particle projection cannon connected to a PPC capacitor. For those who need a refresher, the capacitor is essentially a piece of technology that stores up additional energy for the PPC. For each turn that the capacitor is charged, it generates 5 passive heat. When fired, the MF's ERPPC will hit for 20 damage out to 23 hexes and generates 20 heat. Thankfully, the 11th double heatsink added to the configuration leaves the MF at 0 heat that turn. For closer range conflict resolution, 2 medium pulse lasers were added to the left arm. Finally, a targeting computer installed into the left torso improved the accuracy of the ERPPC and pulse lasers by 1. Adding in the medium pulse lasers to your shots would push the mech into the red by 8, which would cause some issues, but that's Future Frog's problem. Now belongs to Fire and Fury. The total possible damage output is just 34, but with 20 of that hitting a single location, no battlemech can ignore this little bugger for long. The biggest drawback is the turn wait to charge the capacitor and the possibility of that capacitor exploding if critically hit, but if anything, I think the wait promotes good placement and tactical thinking on behalf of the user. If you have thoughts or would have gone a completely different direction with your Battle Cobra config, let me know in the comments. I'd love to see what you can come up with for an alternative. If you want to take the Battle Cobra MF out for some fun, I've included the PDF record sheet for it down in the Dropbox link in the video notes below. So why do we love the Battle Cobra? Both of them. While definitely more of a niche clan omnimech, the Battle Cobra earns its place in the lore with its durable and functional design and some pretty solid official configurations. Very few of them could be labeled objectively bad. It's an omnimech that doesn't show up often in the lore, but when it does, it leaves an impression. As a fan of Clan Jade Falcon, it's just endlessly amusing that they claimed a mech from their rivals twice over, first the Steel Vipers, then Comstar. The legacy of the Battle Cobra continues to crop up in unexpected places. Even the notorious Word of Blake Celestials had a connection to it, since the 45-ton Preta was heavily influenced by our snake friend, developed thanks to the original research done on the Tukayyid salvaged Battle Cobras later stolen from Comstar. I'm curious to hear what you think about the Battle Cobra. I know it's more of a niche omnimech, but with the newer lore about the Comstar version, I think it's important to stretch our boundaries beyond the mechs found in the 3025 and 3050 TROs. There's a lot of cool mech lore out there, folks. Thanks as always for coming out today. If you think the video deserves it and want to show your support, the easiest way to do that is to hit the like button, maybe even subscribe to the channel, and leave a comment. All of these things make the YouTube algorithm happy. If you want to go one step further and directly support through Ko-fi or the YouTube channel memberships, that's a great way to also ensure that the nonsense keeps flowing. A little bit all adds up to make a big difference. I can't do this without you, and I appreciate it. If you'd like to join the nonsense on the MechFrog Discord channel, we'd love to see you. I've included a link to the server in the video notes. It's the best way to find out what's coming up next week, talk to BattleTech fans, and otherwise hang out with some pretty awesome people. With that, I'll say have a great week, please take care of each other, and go out and make the world a slightly better place today and tomorrow.